When Dr. Darren George, a brilliant black surgeon, lost his fiancée Anna to a brutal police killing, he vowed to expose the racist cops who stole her life, but now, armed with chilling new evidence of their hatred and a plot to silence him forever, he faces a heart-pounding race against time to bring them down in a New York courtroom, where one wrong move could cost him everything. As you watch, do not forget to subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell to get notified when we share our next video. Darren George has been haunted by the death of his fiancée, which happened 3 months ago. As a young black doctor, he was having to manage his professional career with the demand of appearing in court every day to seek justice for Anna, his late fiancée, the fluorescent lights of New York Presbyterian Hospital buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow across the emergency room where Darren stitched a patient's lacerated arm. His hands, steady as ever, moved with the precision of a man who'd saved countless lives. But his eyes, heavy with grief, betrayed the storm raging inside. 3 months had passed since Anna Smith, the woman who'd filled his world with laughter and light, was taken from him. Her absence was a wound no suture could close. New York City pulsed beyond the hospital walls, honking taxis, flashing lights, the ceaseless hum of 8 million lives. Darren, at 38, had carved out a place here as one of the city's finest trauma surgeons. His colleagues called him a miracle worker, a man who could pull patients back from the brink. But no amount of skill could bring back Anna, the 32-year-old artist whose vibrant murals adorned community centers in Harlem. She'd been his anchor, his reason to smile after 16-hour shifts. They were supposed to marry in June, under the cherry blossoms in Central Park. Now, those dreams lay buried with her. Anna had been pulled over by NYPD officers on a rainy night in March, driving home from a gallery opening in Brooklyn. The official report claimed she'd resisted arrest after a routine stop and died in a struggle. But the truth, Darren knew, was uglier. Witnesses described a brutal encounter, cops slamming her against the car, her cries echoing down the quiet street. The autopsy revealed bruises, a fractured rib, and a heart that stopped under the weight of it all. The cops, officers Daniel Hargrove and Michael Tate, walked free, their badges untarnished, while Darren's world collapsed. He'd thrown himself into the fight for justice, spending every spare moment gathering evidence, grainy dashcam footage, inconsistent police reports, a bystander's shaky phone video. He sat through endless court hearings in Manhattan's criminal courthouse, the air thick with bureaucracy and indifference. Each time he presented evidence, the judge, stern, white-haired Judge Callahan, dismissed it as inconclusive or irrelevant. Darren's lawyer, a well-meaning but overworked public defender named Rachel, urged him. Her eyes sparkled with a joy that felt like a knife in his chest now. He swiped to another image, a screenshot of the police report, its cold clinical language mocking her memory. Dr. George? A nurse, Maria, approached, her voice soft. You okay? You've been sitting here for an hour. He forced a smile, the kind he'd perfected for patients' families. Just thinking, Maria. Thanks. She hesitated, then sat across from him. I saw you on the news again. Outside the courthouse. You're fighting so hard for her. Darren's throat tightened. Someone has to. They think they can bury her and move on. They're wrong. Maria reached out, squeezing his hand. You're not alone, you know. The whole community's behind you. Harlem, Bed-Stuy, people talk about Anna's murals all the time. They're planning a vigil next week. The words warmed him, but they couldn't fill the void. The community's love for Anna was real, but it wasn't justice. Justice was Hargrove and Tate behind bars, not patrolling the streets like nothing happened. Justice was accountability, not another candlelit vigil. The next morning, Darren stood outside the courthouse, the spring air sharp against his skin. Reporters swarmed, microphones thrust toward him. "Dr. George, any comment on the latest dismissal?" one shouted. He ignored them, his jaw tight, and pushed through the crowd to meet Rachel inside. In the courtroom, Judge Callahan peered over his glasses, his voice monotone. "Dr. George, your motion to admit the bystander footage is denied. The video lacks proper authentication and chain of custody." Darren's fists clenched under the table. "Your Honor, the video clearly shows." "Enough," Callahan cut him off. "This court will not entertain speculation. Next case." Rachel leaned over, whispering, "We'll appeal, Darren. We'll keep fighting." But as they left the courtroom, Darren's steps slowed. The marble halls felt like a maze, each turn leading to another dead end. Outside, the city roared, sirens, laughter, life moving on without Anna. He stopped on the courthouse steps, the weight of it all pressing down. Rachel touched his arm. "You need to rest, Darren. You're killing yourself." "I can't rest," he said, voice low. "Not while they're out there, free." That night, Darren sat in his Harlem apartment, the walls lined with Anna's sketches, bright, swirling colors that seemed to pulse with her spirit. He poured a glass of bourbon, untouched, and opened his laptop. Files littered the screen, police records, witness statements, a map of the precincts where Hargrove and Tate worked. He'd spent months tracking their patterns, their shifts, their habits. Hargrove, 45, was a loudmouth who frequented a cop bar in Midtown. Tate, younger and quieter, lived in a modest apartment in Queens. Both were untouchable, shielded by the blue wall of silence. Darren's phone buzzed, a text from his brother, Jamal. *, "You good, man? Saw the news. Come stay with us for a bit, *. He typed back, *, "I'm fine. Just need time, *, a lie, but Jamal didn't need to carry his pain too. He clicked on a file labeled March 12. The bystander video loaded, grainy but unmistakable. Anna's voice, panicked, pleading, "I didn't do anything. Please." Hargrove's silhouette loomed, his baton raised. The video cut off before the worst, but Darren's mind filled in the blanks. He'd watched it 100 times, each viewing a fresh wound. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The system was a machine, grinding down people like him and Anna, spitting out excuses instead of justice. He thought of the Hippocratic oath he'd taken, * do no harm, *, but what about the harm done to him? To her? The oath didn't account for a world that let killers walk free. Days bled into weeks. Darren's shifts at the hospital grew more grueling, his focus slipping. He stitched wounds, set bones, saved lives, but every patient's face blurred into Anna's. At night, he roamed the city, not as a doctor but as a man on the edge. He followed Hargrove to the bar, watching from across the street as the officer laughed with his buddies, oblivious. He staked out Tate's apartment, noting the times he left for his shift. It wasn't enough to know their routines, Darren needed proof, something the courts couldn't dismiss. One evening, he slipped into a community meeting in Harlem, held in a church basement. The room buzzed with anger and grief, families who'd lost loved ones to police violence, activists demanding reform. A woman named Keisha, whose brother had been killed by cops 2 years ago, pulled Darren aside. "I know that look," she said. "You're not just here to listen." Darren met her gaze. "I'm tired of waiting for justice that's never coming." She nodded, her eyes hard but kind. "Be careful, document. You're too important to lose. But if you're going after them, you need a plan. Not just anger." Her words stuck with him. Anger was fuel, but it could burn him out. He needed precision, like in the operating room. He started small, hacking into public police databases using skills he'd picked up from a tech-savvy cousin. He cross-referenced Hargrove and Tate's records, finding patterns, complaints filed against them, swept under the rug, a history of excessive force, ignored. He reached out to witnesses from Anna's case, meeting them in quiet diners or back alleys, piecing together their stories. One witness, a bodega owner named Miguel, hesitated before speaking. "I saw it all, man. They didn't have to do her like that. But I got kids. If I testify, they'll come for me." Darren leaned forward, voice steady. "I won't let them hurt you. But I need the truth." Miguel's hands shook as he handed over a USB drive. "I kept a copy of my security footage. It's clearer. Then the phone video shows everything." Darren's heart raced as he watched the footage later that night. It was damning, Hargrove's baton striking Anna's side, Tate holding her down as she gasped for air. It was the proof he'd been chasing, but he knew the courts would find a way to bury it, just like everything else. The turning point came on a rainy afternoon in June, 3 months to the day since Anna's death. Darren sat in the courtroom, his suit damp, his hands gripping the bench. Rachel had submitted the new footage, her voice steady as she argued its admissibility. Judge Callahan's face was unreadable as he reviewed the evidence. The room held its breath. "Motion denied," Callahan said finally. "The footage is inadmissible due to potential tampering. This court will not be swayed by unverified evidence." Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Rachel's shoulders slumped. Darren felt the air leave his lungs, the world tilting. He stood, ignoring Rachel's plea to stay calm, and walked out, the rain soaking him as he stepped onto the courthouse steps. The city stretched before him, a glittering, indifferent sprawl. He thought of Anna's murals, her laughter, the life they'd planned. He thought of Hargrove and Tate, laughing in their bar, sleeping soundly in their beds. The system wasn't broken, it was built this way, designed to protect men like them while people like Anna paid the price. Darren's hands trembled, not with fear but with clarity. The courts wouldn't deliver justice. The law wouldn't hold them accountable. But he could. He would. He pulled out his phone, opening a note he'd started weeks ago, a list of names, addresses, and schedules. Hargrove. Tate. The others who'd looked the other way. He wasn't a vigilante, not yet, but the line between justice and vengeance was blurring. He'd start with the truth, exposing their lies, their corruption, their crimes. He'd use every tool at his disposal, the footage, the witnesses, the records. And if that failed, he'd find another way. They'd taken the love of his life, but they wouldn't take his dignity. As the rain fell harder, Darren walked into the night, his steps deliberate, his heart a furnace of resolve. He'd take them down, one by one, until the world knew Anna's name, and the truth. Have you ever been in such situations like Darren? Drop a sad emoji if you can relate, asterisk. The rain had stopped, but the streets of New York City glistened under the sodium glow of streetlights, a slick mirror reflecting the chaos of Darren George's world. At 38, he was no longer just the trauma surgeon who stitched bodies back together at New York Presbyterian Hospital. He was a man on a mission, driven by a grief so raw it felt like a living thing inside him. 3 months had passed since Anna Smith, his fiancée, was killed by officers Daniel Hargrove and Michael Tate during a traffic stop that was anything but routine. The courts had failed him, dismissing every piece of evidence, dashcam footage, witness accounts, Anna's bruised body, as if her life meant nothing. Now, Darren was done waiting for justice. He'd take it himself. He'd started tailing Hargrove and Tate, his nights no longer his own. The city, with its pulsing arteries of traffic and shadowed corners, became his hunting ground. He wasn't a vigilante, at least, he told himself he wasn't. Not yet. He was a doctor, a man of precision, and he approached this new pursuit with the same methodical care he brought to the operating room. He'd learned their routines. Hargrove's late-night beers at O'Malley's in Midtown, Tate's early morning jogs through Flushing Meadows. He'd hacked into public police databases, cross-referenced complaints, and mapped their patrol routes. Every move was calculated, every risk weighed. But the weight of Anna's absence pressed harder with each passing day, her laughter a ghost in his ears, her murals a constant reminder of what he'd lost. It was a humid July night, the air thick with the smell of asphalt and street food, when Darren first struck gold. He'd been following Hargrove for weeks, blending into the city's chaos in a black hoodie and jeans. His medical bag swapped for a backpack stuffed with a small camera, a notebook, and a burner phone. O'Malley's was a cop hangout, its neon sign flickering above a grimy storefront on 8th Avenue. Darren parked his beat-up Toyota a block away, the car's anonymity a shield. He'd learned to move like a shadow, unnoticed in a city that never stopped moving. Inside the bar, Hargrove was a loud presence, his voice carrying over the jukebox's wail. Darren couldn't go in, too risky, but he'd planted a small, high-sensitivity microphone under a table the week before. During a rare moment when the bar was empty. The device, a gift from his cousin Marcus, a tech whiz with a knack for bending the law, transmitted to an app on Darren's phone. He sat in his car, earbuds in, listening as Hargrove's voice crackled through. "Another round, Jimmy," Hargrove bellowed, his words slurring slightly. "And none of that weak shit." Darren's jaw tightened. He adjusted the volume, the ambient noise of clinking glasses and laughter fading as he focused on Hargrove's conversation. Tate was there too, his quieter tone harder to catch, but unmistakable. They were with another officer, someone Darren didn't recognize, their voices a low rumble of camaraderie. "You see that protest up in Harlem?" Hargrove said, his tone dripping with disdain. "All them people marchin' for that girl. What's her name? Smith? Like she was some saint." Tate snorted. "Waste of time. She shouldn't have mouthed off. You give them an inch, they take a mile." Darren's fingers gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles paling. The word hit Darren like a slap, but what followed was worse. Hargrove leaned in, Darren could hear the creak of the barstool, and launched into a tirade. "I'm sick of it, man. Every shift, it's the same. They look at you like you're the enemy, like we ain't out here keepin' their streets safe. Ungrateful bastards. If it was up to me, I'd lock 'em all up, or worse. Clear the streets for good." Tate laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You sound like you're ready to start a war, Danny." "Maybe I am," Hargrove said, his voice low but venomous. "They don't belong here. Never did. You see. How they live. Like roaches, breeding and causing trouble wherever they go. Darren's heart pounded, his vision blurring with rage. He wanted to storm into the bar, drag Hargrove out, and make him feel the pain he'd inflicted on Anna. But he couldn't. Not yet. He needed more than words, he needed proof that would stick, proof the system couldn't ignore. He hit record on his phone, capturing every hateful word, every chuckle, every clink of their glasses as they toasted their bigotry. The conversation stretched on for nearly an hour, a cascade of slurs and stereotypes that made Darren's stomach churn. They talked about cleaning up Harlem, about how those people were a blight on the city. They laughed about past arrests, about teaching lessons to black kids who got out of line. Hargrove bragged about a time he'd roughed up a teenager in the Bronx, his tone gleeful. Tate, usually the quieter one, egged him on, recounting his own stories of putting them in their place. Darren sat frozen, the weight of their words pressing down on him. This wasn't just about Anna anymore. It was bigger, uglier, a glimpse into the rot at the heart of the system that had failed her. He saved the recording, his hands shaking, and drove home, the city blurring past him. In his apartment, he played it again, forcing himself to listen, to let the hate fuel his resolve. This was the truth he'd been chasing, the kind of evidence that could expose Hargrove and Tate for what they were. But it wasn't enough. Words weren't actions. He needed them caught in the act, something undeniable. Over the next few weeks, Darren's life became a dual existence. By day, he was Dr. George, saving lives. In the ER, his hands steady as he repaired torn arteries and fractured bones. His colleagues noticed the change in him, the dark circles under his eyes, the way he flinched at sudden noises, but they chalked it up to grief. They didn't know he spent his nights in the shadows, tailing Hargrove and Tate, building a case the courts couldn't dismiss. He enlisted help from unlikely allies. Keisha, the activist from the church meeting, introduced him to a network of community organizers who'd been documenting police misconduct for years. One of them, a wiry 20-something named Trey, was a genius with surveillance tech. Trey had a rap sheet for hacking but a heart for justice, and he agreed to help Darren plant cameras in. The usual spot was a 24-hour diner in Washington Heights, its fluorescent lights a beacon for insomniacs and night owls. Darren arrived in 20 minutes, his heart racing. Trey was already there. Hunched over a laptop in a corner booth, his hoodie pulled low. He slid a USB drive across the table as Darren sat down. Got something big, Trey said, his voice low. Caught Hargrove and Tate on camera, last saviors of the world, please do not copy or reproduce without permission. If you were Darren, at this point what would you do? Be honest in the comments section, someone. Might your comment very helpful in their struggles. The diner in Washington Heights buzzed with the low hum of late-night life, clinking dishes, the sizzle of bacon on the grill, and the occasional burst of laughter from a group of cab drivers in the corner. Darren. George slid into the booth across from Trey, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on Trey's face, his eyes wide with a mix of excitement and fear. The USB drive Trey had slid across the table sat between them, small but heavy with promise. Darren's hands itched to grab it, but he forced himself to stay calm, to keep the mask of control he'd worn since Anna's death. 3 months ago. Got something big, Trey repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. He glanced around the diner, ensuring no one was listening. Hargrove and Tate, man. They fucked up. Big time. Darren leaned forward, his pulse quickening. What did you get? Trey opened his laptop, its screen cracked but glowing, and plugged in the USB drive. Camera we set up. Outside O'Malley's. Caught M last night, after their shift. They were in the alley, thinkin' they were alone. They weren't. Darren's breath caught as Trey hit play. The footage was grainy but clear enough, the camera's audio picking up every word. Officers Daniel Hargrove and Michael Tate stood in the alley, lit by the dim glow of a streetlight. Hargrove, stocky and red-faced, puffed on a cigarette, his badge glinting on his uniform. Tate, leaner and younger, leaned against the wall, his eyes scanning the street. A third officer, unfamiliar to Darren, lingered nearby, his posture tense. "Fucking tired of this city," Hargrove growled, exhaling smoke. "Everywhere you turn, it's them. Blacks. Stirrin' up trouble, marchin' like they own the place." Tate smirked, his voice low but sharp. "Yeah, well, that's what happens when you let 'em think they're equal. They get loud, start demandin' shit. Like that Smith chick. Her and her damn fiancé, the doctor." Darren's stomach twisted at Anna's name, but he forced himself to keep watching. The third officer, his face half hidden in shadow, nodded. "Always playin' the victim. You see that vigil they're plannin' for her? Like she was some martyr. She was just another loudmouth who didn't know her place." Hargrove laughed, a ugly, guttural sound. "Place? Their place is nowhere near here. I'm tellin' you, if it was up to me, we'd round 'em up, ship 'em out. Harlem, Bed-Stuy, clean it all out. Let the city breathe again." The conversation stretched on, a venomous stream of hate that poured from their mouths like poison. They didn't just hate Anna, they hated everyone like her, everyone like Darren. Hargrove ranted about keeping them in line, about how black people were breeding like roaches, and ruining New York. Tate, usually the quieter one, chimed in with stories of arrests he'd made, black kids he'd taught a lesson with his baton. The third officer egged them on, tossing in slurs and laughing like it was a game. They spoke for nearly 20 minutes, their voices growing louder, more reckless, as if the alley's shadows made them invincible. Darren's hands shook, his nails digging into his palms. He wanted to scream, to smash the laptop, to find Hargrove and Tate and make them feel the pain they'd caused. But he couldn't. Not yet. This footage was gold, raw, undeniable proof of the racism that fueled Anna's death. But it wasn't enough to tie them directly to her murder. He needed more, something the courts couldn't dismiss, something that would make the world see the truth. Trey closed the laptop, his eyes searching Darren's face. "This enough, Doc? We take this to the media. It's over for them. They can't hide from this." Darren shook his head, his voice low but firm. "It's not enough. Not yet. This shows who they are, but it doesn't prove what they did to Anna. The courts will say it's just talk, not action. They'll wiggle out of it. Like always." Trey frowned, leaning back. "Man, this ain't just talk. This is hate. You hear what they said? They're proud of it. They're Logan about her." "I know," Darren said, his voice breaking slightly. He closed his eyes, picturing Anna's face, her warm brown eyes, her braids swinging as she laughed. "But I need them caught, Trey. Not just exposed for being racists. I need proof they killed her. Something that sticks." Trey sighed, running a hand over his shaved head. "Aight, document. What's the play, then?" Darren leaned forward, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. Keep following them. Keep the cameras rolling. They're careless, they'll slip again. Get me everything, where they go, who they talk to. What they say. If they're dirty, there's more to find. I know it. Trey hesitated, his eyes narrowing. This is dangerous, man. You're playing with fire. These ain't just cops, they're connected. You go too deep, they'll come for you. I'm already in too deep, Darren said, his voice barely above a whisper. They took Anna. They don't get to walk away. Trey studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I'm in. But you gotta promise me you'll watch your back. You're too important to lose, document. Darren forced a small smile, the kind he used to reassure patients' families. I will. Just get me what I need. The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and relentless pursuit. Darren's life split into two, the doctor who saved lives by day and the shadow who hunted justice by night. At the hospital, he moved through his shifts like a ghost, his hands steady but his mind elsewhere. His colleagues noticed. Maria, the nurse who'd sat with him in the cafeteria, kept asking if he was okay, her eyes soft with concern. He brushed her off with vague assurances, unable to tell her the truth. He couldn't drag anyone else into this. His nights belonged to the city. New York was a beast, its streets alive with secrets and danger. Darren learned to navigate it like a predator, blending into crowds, slipping through alleys, his backpack a lifeline of tech and evidence. Trey was his eyes and ears, planting cameras in new spots, a bodega across from Tate's apartment, a parking lot near the precinct, a dive bar where Hargrove met other cops. The footage rolled in, a steady stream of glimpses into their lives, Hargrove's drunken rants, Tate's quiet menace, their casual cruelty on display. But it was the small moments that humanized Darren's pain, that kept him tethered to his mission. One night, he stopped by one of Anna's murals in Harlem, a vibrant explosion of color on a community center wall. It depicted a young black girl reaching for the stars, her face radiant with hope. Anna had painted it last year, pouring her heart into every brushstroke. Darren stood before it, his fingers tracing the edges of the girl's silhouette, tears burning his eyes. I'm trying, baby, he whispered. I'm trying. He thought of their plans, the wedding under the cherry blossoms, the house they'd dreamed of buying. Upstate, the kids they'd laughed about naming. Anna had been his light, the one who made the city's chaos bearable. Now, without her, he was adrift, his only anchor the need to make Hargrove and Tate pay. Trey kept his word, tailing the officers with a skill that bordered on reckless. He hacked into their patrol schedules, tracked their movements, and fed Darren a steady stream of intel. One night, he called Darren to a park in Queens, near Tate's apartment. They met under a flickering street lamp, the air thick with the scent of cut grass and exhaust. Got something new, Trey said, handing over another USB drive. Caught M in the precinct parking lot. They were talking about a case, but it wasn't Anna's. Some kid they roughed up last week. Sounded like they've done it before. Darren watched the footage later, alone in his apartment. Hargrove and Tate stood by their patrol car. Their voices low but clear. Kid thought he could run, Hargrove said, chuckling. Gave him a little lesson in respect. Tate nodded. The footage was damning, but it still wasn't enough. Darren needed a direct link to Anna's death. Something that would tie their hands to her bruises, their actions to her last breath. He leaned back. Staring at the ceiling, Anna's sketches watching him from the walls. Her art was everywhere, bright. Swirls of color, faces of people she'd loved, dreams she'd never live. He couldn't let her become another statistic, another name forgotten by a system that didn't care. The summer dragged on, the city sweltering under a heat wave that made the asphalt shimmer. Darren's days were a grind of hospital shifts and sleepless nights, his body running on coffee and adrenaline. He met with witnesses in secret, people too scared to testify in court but willing to talk to him. A delivery driver who'd seen Anna's stop described Hargrove's rage, the way he'd slammed her against the car. A neighbor who'd heard her screams confirmed the timeline. Each story added a piece to the puzzle, but none were enough on their own. Keisha, the activist, became a quiet ally, connecting Darren with others who'd lost loved ones to police violence. They met in church basements and community centers, sharing stories that echoed his own grief, rage, and a system that turned its back. One woman, a mother whose son had been killed in a routine stop, gripped Darren's hand and said, "Don't let them break you. You're stronger than they know." Her words stayed with him, a reminder of the dignity he carried, even when the world tried to strip it away. He wasn't just fighting for Anna, he was fighting for all of them, for every name etched into Harlem's heart. Then, on a sticky September night, Trey called again, his voice electric with urgency. "Doc, you gotta meet me now." Same spot. Darren was there in 15 minutes, his heart racing as he slid into the diner booth. Trey's face was taut, his hands fidgeting with a napkin. "I got it, man," he said, sliding another USB drive across the table. "This one's different. They're talking about her. Anna." Darren's breath hitched. He grabbed the drive, his fingers trembling as he plugged it into Trey's laptop. The screen flickered to life, showing Hargrove and Tate in the same alley behind O'Malley's, their voices low but clear. The timestamp read 2 nights ago, just after midnight. "Fuckin' case is draggin' on," Hargrove muttered, lighting a cigarette. "That doctor's still sniffin' around. Tryin' to make trouble." Tate snorted, kicking a pebble across the alley. "He's wastin' his time. Callahan's got our back. Evidence ain't stickin', and it won't. Another week, maybe 2, and the Anna Smith case is dead. Closed for good." Hargrove grinned, a predator's smile. "Good riddance. She was trouble from the start. Mouthy bitch. Shoulda known better than to talk back." Darren's vision blurred, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst. The footage played on. Hargrove and Tate laughing about how they'd handled Anna, how the system would protect them. How they'd be free of her troubles soon. It wasn't a confession, not quite, but it was close, a crack in their armor that Darren could pry open. He looked up at Trey, his face a mask of shock, anger, and something else, hope, fragile but burning. This was it, the thread he'd been chasing. But as the footage ended, Trey's eyes widened, and he leaned forward, whispering, "There's more, document. I didn't tell you yet, but I caught them again last night. They're plannin' something. Something big." Darren's heart stopped. "What?" Trey's voice dropped lower, his eyes darting to the diner's entrance. "They're talkin' about makin' sure the case stays closed. For good. And, Doc, they mentioned you." "Wait. Did you see that coming? What do you think Darren will do now?" Share your comment on the comments section, *. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on Darren George's face as he sat Frozen, Trey's words echoing in his mind, asterisk, they're talkin' about makin' sure the case stays closed. 4. Good. And, Doc, they mentioned you. Asterisk, the USB drive in his hand felt like a live grenade, its contents, a video of officers Daniel Hargrove and Michael Tate laughing about Anna Smith's death and plotting to bury her case, burning a hole in his resolve. For months, Darren had chased justice for his fiancée, the vibrant artist killed by these cops during a traffic stop in March. The courts had dismissed his evidence, the system shielding Hargrove and Tate like untouchable gods. But this new footage, raw and damning, was a crack in their armor. It wasn't a confession, but it was close enough to try again. Darren's heart pounded, a mix of rage and fragile hope. The video showed Hargrove and Tate's arrogance, their certainty that the case would die, that Judge Callahan would protect them. But their mention of him, asterisk Dr. George, the doctor sniffing around asterisk, sent a chill down his spine. They knew he was coming for them. The thought should have scared him, but instead, it sharpened his focus. He wasn't just fighting for Anna anymore, he was fighting for his own survival, for the dignity they'd tried to strip from both of them. He looked at Trey, the young hacker's face taut with worry. You sure about this? Darren asked, his voice low. You said they're planning something. What exactly did you hear? Trey leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. They didn't spell it out, but it's bad, Doc. Hargrove was talkin' about tying up loose ends. Said they can't let you keep diggin'. I don't know if it's a threat or what, but you gotta move fast. Darren nodded, his jaw tight. The footage was a weapon, but it wasn't enough on its own. The courts had already dismissed clearer evidence, dashcam videos, witness accounts, even Anna's autopsy showing bruises. He needed a lawyer who could wield this new evidence like a scalpel, someone who understood the system's biases and knew how to cut through them. His current lawyer, Rachel, was good but overworked, her public defender caseload leaving her stretched thin. Darren needed someone relentless, someone who'd fought battles like this and won. I'm taking this to court, Darren said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. One more time. But I need a new lawyer. Someone who can make this stick. Trey raised an eyebrow. Rachel's not cuttin' it? She's trying, Darren said, but she's drowning in cases. I need someone who lives for this fight. Someone who gets what it means to go up against cops like Hargrove and Tate. Trey leaned back, thinking. I might know someone. Not here, though. You'd have to travel. There's this lawyer, Samuel Carter, down in Atlanta. Old dude, black, been talking on police brutality cases since the 80s, they call him the Bulldog. My cousin worked with him on a case a few years back, says he's the real deal. Doesn't back down, doesn't lose. Darren's eyes narrowed. Atlanta's a long way. You sure he's worth it? Man, Carter's a legend, Trey said. He took on the Atlanta PD and won $1 million settlement for a family whose kid got killed. If anyone can make this video hurt Hargrove and Tate, it's him. Darren gripped the USB drive, his mind racing. Atlanta was over 800 miles away, a 13-hour drive or a pricey last-minute flight. He'd have to take time off work, something he hadn't done since Anna's death. But the thought of facing Callahan's courtroom again with the same tired arguments, the same dismissive rulings, was unbearable. If Samuel Carter was the key to justice, Darren would cross the country to find him. Get me his contact, Darren said. I'll go to him. The next morning, Darren stood in the hospital's break room, staring at his reflection in a cracked mirror. His eyes were bloodshot, the dark circles beneath them a testament to sleepless nights. He'd spent the early hours reviewing the footage again, memorizing every word, every smirk. Hargrove's voice, good riddance. She was trouble from the start, played on a loop in his head, fueling the fire in his chest. He splashed cold water on his face, trying to shake the exhaustion, and called his supervisor to request a week off. Family emergency, he lied, his voice steady. The hospital was short-staffed, but they couldn't say no to Dr. George, the man who'd worked miracles in the ER. By noon, he'd booked a flight to Atlanta for the next day. Trey had come through with Samuel Carter's office number, and after a brief call, the lawyer's assistant scheduled a meeting for Wednesday morning. "Mr. Carter's a busy man," the assistant said, her southern drawl warm but firm. "But he's intrigued by your case. Bring everything you've got." Darren spent the evening preparing, printing documents, copying files onto multiple USB drives, and packing a small duffel bag. He stood in his Harlem apartment, surrounded by Anna's murals and sketches, her presence woven into every corner. A photo of them sat on the coffee table, Anna laughing, her braids swinging, Darren's arm around her as they stood in Central Park. He touched the frame, his throat tightening. "I'm not giving up, baby," he whispered. "Not ever." The flight to Atlanta was turbulent, the plane rattling through storm clouds as Darren stared out the window, his thoughts a tangle of hope and fear. He'd packed light, a laptop, the USB drives, a folder stuffed with police reports, witness statements, and Anna's autopsy. The weight of it all pressed against his chest, a reminder of the stakes. Hargrove and Tate weren't just cops, they were part of a machine. One that had crushed Anna and countless others. If Carter couldn't help him, Darren didn't know what he'd do. The thought of taking justice into his own hands lingered, dark and tempting, but he pushed it down. He was a doctor, a man of healing, not destruction. He had to believe the system could work, if only he found the right person to fight it. Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport was a maze of bustling crowds and echoing announcements. Darren navigated it in a daze, his backpack slung over one shoulder. He rented a car, a modest sedan, nothing flashy, and drove to a small hotel near downtown, the city's skyline a mix of gleaming towers and sprawling greenery. Atlanta felt different from New York, slower but no less alive. Its streets humming with history and resilience. Darren checked in, dropped his bag, and collapsed onto the bed, the USB drive clutched in his hand. Sleep came in fits, Anna's face haunting his dreams. Wednesday morning dawned humid and bright, the sun cutting through the hotel curtains. Darren dressed carefully. A crisp white shirt, navy tie, and dark slacks, the same outfit he'd worn to court. He wanted to look professional, like the doctor he was, not the grieving man teetering on the edge. Samuel Carter's office was in a modest brick building in Midtown, its sign reading, Carter and Associates, Civil Rights Law. The lobby was small but warm, with framed photos of civil rights marches and newspaper clippings about landmark cases. A receptionist, an older black woman with kind eyes, greeted him. "Mr. George? Mr. Carter's expecting you." Darren followed her down a hallway lined with bookshelves, the air smelling of coffee and old leather. Samuel Carter's office was at the end, a cluttered space filled with files, law books, and a worn desk. Carter himself stood to greet him, a tall man in his late 60s, his hair graying at the temples, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. His suit was tailored but slightly wrinkled, as if he'd been up all night working. His presence filled the room, a quiet authority that reminded Darren of his father. "Dr. George," Carter said, his voice deep and warm, tinged with a Georgia accent. "Samuel Carter. Sit down, son. You've come a long way." Darren shook his hand, feeling the strength in Carter's grip. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Carter. I didn't know where else to turn." Carter gestured to a chair, settling behind his desk. "Call me Sam. I've read the news about your fiancée, Anna Smith. Tragic case. I'm sorry for your loss." The words, simple but sincere, hit Darren hard. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Thank you. It's been hard." "I imagine so," Carter said, leaning forward. "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out." Darren took a deep breath, the story spilling out like blood from a wound. He told Carter about Anna, her murals, her laughter, their plans for a life together. He described the night she died, pulled over by Hargrove and Tate in Brooklyn, the official report claiming she'd resisted arrest, the witnesses who saw otherwise. He recounted the court hearings, Judge Callahan's dismissals, the system's indifference. And then he pulled out the USB drives, explaining the footage Trey had captured, the bar conversation filled with racial slurs, the alley talk about burying Anna's case, the hint of a threat against him. Carter listened intently, his face unreadable but his eyes never leaving Darren's. When Darren finished, Carter leaned back, steepling his fingers. "You've got a lot here, Dr. George. The footage is powerful, shows their character, their bias. But you're right, it's not a direct confession. The court's up there, especially with a judge like Callahan, will try to spin it as irrelevant. We need to tie it to Anna's death, make it undeniable." Darren's heart sank. "So it's not enough?" "Not yet," Carter said, his voice firm but not unkind. "But it's a start. You've got their words, their patterns, their history. We can build on this. Show a pattern of misconduct, racial animus, excessive force. If we can link it to Anna's case, maybe with more witness testimony or physical evidence, we can make it stick." Darren nodded, hope flickering. "I've got witnesses, but they're scared. The system protects cops like Hargrove and Tate. They've got friends in high places." Carter's eyes narrowed. "I know the type. Been fightin' men like them my whole career. Let me tell you something, son. I grew up in Alabama, 60s. Saw my share of cops who thought they were above the law. I've been in courtrooms where judges looked at me like I was dirt, where juries didn't care about black lives. But I've won cases, big ones, because I don't back down. If you're ready to fight, I'll fight with you." Darren met his gaze, feeling a spark of something he hadn't felt in months, trust. "I'm ready. I'll do whatever it takes." Carter nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Good. Here's what we do. I'll review all your evidence, every file, every video. We'll strategize, figure out how to get that footage admitted, maybe file a federal civil rights case if the state courts keep stonewalling. But I need you to keep digging. Get me more witnesses, documents, anything that shows these officers' history. And stay safe. If they're talking about you, they're watching you." Darren's stomach tightened. "I know. I'll be careful." Carter stood, extending his hand. "You're not alone in this, Dr. George. Anna deserves justice, and so do you. I'll come to New York for the next hearing. We'll take this fight to them together." Darren shook his hand, a weight lifting from his chest. For the first time in months, he felt like he wasn't carrying this burden alone. Carter's resolve, his history, his willingness to cross 800 miles for a stranger, it was a lifeline. As Darren left the office, the Atlanta sun warm on his face, he clutched the USB drive, his mission clearer than ever. He'd return to New York, gather more evidence, and prepare for the fight of his life. With Samuel Carter by his side, Hargrove and Tate wouldn't walk away so easily. But as he drove back to the hotel, his phone buzzed with a text from Trey. "Doc, they're moving fast. Got new footage. They're talking about ending this case for good, and they're coming for you." The Atlanta sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows across the hotel parking lot as Darren George stared at the text from Trey. "Doc, they're moving fast. Got new footage. They're talking about ending this case for good, and they're coming for you." His heart thudded, a mix of fear and fury pulsing through him. The USB drive in his pocket, containing the damning footage of officers Daniel Hargrove and Michael Tate laughing about Anna Smith's death, felt heavier than ever. Samuel Carter, the seasoned civil rights lawyer he'd just met, had agreed to take the case, promising to travel to New York for the next hearing. But this new message from Trey changed everything. If Hargrove and Tate were plotting against him, time was running out. Darren needed to move fast, to bring this fight to a head before they could silence him. He drove back to his hotel, the city's lights blurring past, his mind racing. Anna's face, her warm brown eyes, her braids swinging as she laughed, haunted him, a reminder of why he couldn't stop. 3 months ago, Hargrove and Tate had pulled her over in Brooklyn, claiming she'd resisted arrest. The truth, buried under lies and dismissed evidence, was brutal. They'd beaten her, left her broken, her heart stopping under their violence. Darren, a 38-year-old trauma surgeon, had spent every moment since gathering proof, dashcam footage, witness accounts, a bodega's security video, but the courts, led by Judge Callahan, had rejected it all. Now, with Carter's help and Trey's relentless surveillance, Darren had a chance to expose. Back in his hotel room, Darren called Trey, his voice low but urgent. "What did you get? Tell me everything." Trey's voice crackled through the burner phone. "Caught M last night, same alley behind O'Malley's. They were with that third guy again, Officer Paulson. I checked his badge number. They're spooked. Document. They know you're not letting up." Hargrove was talking about taking care of you before the case gets any further. Said they can't let you keep digging. Darren's grip tightened on the phone. "They said they'd kill me?" "Not in so many words," Trey said, "but it's clear as day." Hargrove said, "The doctor's gotta go, like she did." Paulson nodded along, like it was no big deal. "I got it all on tape, crystal clear." Darren's stomach churned, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Send me the footage. And keep watching them. We're close, Trey. Carter's on board, he's coming to New York. We're taking this to court, and this time, they won't walk away." "Aight, Doc," Trey said, his voice heavy. "But you gotta watch your back. These guys ain't playing." Darren hung up, his mind a storm of resolve and fear. He plugged the new USB drive into his laptop, the footage loading with agonizing slowness. The alley behind O'Malley's appeared, dark and grimy. Hargrove's bulk unmistakable under the streetlight. Tate stood beside him, his face cold, while Paulson, the third officer, paced nervously. Hargrove's voice was low, venomous. "This doctor's a problem. Keeps pushin', keeps showin' up in court. We let him keep goin', he'll dig up somethin' we can't bury." Tate shrugged, his tone flat. "So we end it. Like we ended her. Quick, clean. No loose ends." Paulson hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, but we gotta be careful. He's high profile. People notice Dr. goin' missin'. Hargrove smirked, flicking his cigarette to the ground. "Accidents happen. Car crash, mugging gone. Wrong. City's dangerous, right?" The footage cut off, but Darren's blood ran cold. They weren't just protecting their badges, they were willing to kill to keep their secrets. He saved the file, copied it to multiple drives, and emailed it to Carter. With a note, **, this is what we're up against. I'm coming back to New York. We need to move now, **. The flight back to New York was a blur, the plane's hum drowned out by Darren's racing thoughts. He landed at JFK late Tuesday night, the city's skyline a jagged reminder of his mission. Back in his Harlem apartment, surrounded by Anna's murals, he spread out his evidence on the dining table: police reports, witness statements, autopsy photos, and now 3 USB drives containing Trey's footage. The first showed Hargrove and Tate's racist rant, spewing hate about black people; the second, their laughter about burying Anna's case; the third, their veiled threat to kill him. It was a mountain of proof, but Darren knew the system's tricks. Without Carter's expertise, it could all be dismissed as inconclusive or irrelevant. "Get me those witnesses," Carter said. "Anyone who saw what happened to Anna, anyone who's dealt with Hargrove, Tate, or Paulson. We'll build a case that shows they've been targeting black folks for years. And I'm coming to New York next week for the hearing. We'll hit them with everything we've got." Darren spent the next few days rallying his allies. He met Keisha, the activist, in a Harlem church basement, her eyes fierce with determination. "I've got people who'll talk," she said. A bodega owner, a delivery driver, a kid who got roughed up by Hargrove last year. "They're scared, but they trust you." He tracked down Miguel, the bodega owner who'd given him the security footage. Miguel's hands shook as he agreed to testify, his voice low. "For Anna," he said. "And for my kids. This has to stop." Darren promised to protect him, though he wasn't sure how. The weight of their fear, their trust, settled on his shoulders, a burden he carried for Anna. Samuel Carter arrived in New York on a crisp October morning, his presence a quiet force in the Manhattan courthouse. Darren met him outside, the lawyer's gray suit slightly rumpled from the flight. His briefcase stuffed with files. "Ready, son?" Carter asked, his voice warm but steely. Darren nodded, his heart pounding. "Ready." The courtroom was packed, reporters crowding the benches, their cameras flashing as Darren and Carter took their seats. Judge Callahan, stern and white-haired, presided with the same cold indifference Darren had come to expect. But Carter was different. He moved with purpose, his voice commanding as he presented the case, a federal civil rights lawsuit against Hargrove, Tate, and Paulson, accusing them of racially motivated violence and the murder of Anna Smith. Carter started with the autopsy, projecting images of Anna's bruises and fractured rib on a screen. Gasps rippled through the gallery. "This was no routine stop," Carter said, his voice booming. "This was a Targeted attack on a black woman, fueled by the defendant's documented history of racial animus. He played the first video, Hargrove's voice filling the room with slurs and hate. The courtroom tensed. Jurors shifting uncomfortably. Callahan's face remained impassive, but Darren saw a flicker of unease. Carter followed with the second video, Hargrove and Tate laughing about burying Anna's case, their arrogance laid bare. Murmurs grew louder, reporters scribbling furiously. Then came the final blow, the footage Trey had captured, where Hargrove and Tate discussed taking care of Darren. Carter paused the video, letting the words hang, the doctor's gotta go, like she did. The courtroom erupted, gasps and whispers drowning out Callahan's gavel. Darren's hands trembled. Anna's face flashing in his mind. Carter turned to the jury, his voice steady but searing. These officers didn't just kill Anna Smith. They planned to kill Dr. George to cover it up. This is not justice. This is murder. The trial stretched over weeks, each day a battle. Darren sat through every moment, his heart torn between hope and dread. Carter was a master, dismantling the defense's arguments, exposing their lies. Callahan tried to rein him in, but Carter's reputation and the weight of the evidence made it impossible. The jury, a mix of New Yorkers who'd seen too much of the city's underbelly, listened intently, their faces unreadable. On the final day, Carter closed with a plea that echoed through the courtroom. Anna Smith was a daughter, an artist, a woman who loved and was loved. She deserved better than to die at the hands of men sworn to protect her. Dr. George has fought for her, risking his life to bring you the truth. Don't let her death be in vain. The jury deliberated for 3 days, an eternity for Darren. He barely slept, haunted by Anna's voice, her laughter, her murals. When the verdict came, the courtroom was silent, the air thick with anticipation. The foreman stood, her voice steady. We find the defendants, Daniel Hargrove, Michael Tate, and Robert Paulson, guilty of murder in the first degree and violation of civil rights. The room exploded, cheers, sobs, reporters shouting questions. Hargrove's face crumpled, Tate stared blankly, and Paulson's head dropped. Callahan sentenced them to life without parole, his voice clipped, as if the words pained him. Darren sat frozen, Carter's hand on his shoulder. It was over. Anna's killers would pay. Darren walked out of the courthouse into the October chill, the city's noise a distant hum. Reporters swarmed, but Carter shielded him, his voice firm. Dr. George has no comment. Let him have his piece. Darren drove to a florist in Harlem, buying a bouquet of sunflowers, Anna's favorite. The drive to the cemetery was quiet, the weight of the verdict settling in his chest. At Anna's grave, marked by a simple headstone etched with her name and beloved artist, Darren knelt, placing the sunflowers gently. Tears streamed down his face as he spoke, his voice soft. I did it. Baby. They're gone. They can't hurt anyone else. I wish you could hear me, but I hope you know. I fought for you. He sat there until dusk, the city's lights flickering to life. Justice was his, but Anna was still gone. As he stood to leave, a breeze rustled the sunflowers, and for a moment, he swore he felt her presence, warm and alive, whispering back. This is not just another story of the blacks facing ill-treatment and racism all around the world, it's also about the ability that the posses to preserve and keep fighting until justice is theirs. Comment if this story encourages you and share it with someone who needs it.